In a positive psychology approach, it's not about blind optimism, it's not about sort of ignoring the negative things in the world, and it's certainly not about parenting in a way where you're only trying to give your child a voice when they're feeling upbeat. It's very much about letting them understand their own emotional management and when it is that they don't feel so good, and providing a space as a parent for them to feel angry, for them to feel frustrated, for them to feel guilty or whatever it happens to be, and then using strengths as the portal out. And that's, again, just reinforcing what Robert said. That's how I see strengths. Strengths aren't always about the good times in life. They're, often a really effective way of using strengths is during the negative times, and how it is that we pull ourselves out and we navigate ourselves out of those kinds of things. So today I'm going to talk to you about well-being sort of more generally, rather than a specific topic in positive psychology being strengths, and really kind of to start off with this question of, what is the purpose of a school? And traditionally the purpose of a school has been to be an academic institution, and so that is an institution that takes a mass of young people and introduces them to academic ideas, builds their academic knowledge so that when they graduate from school they can go out into the workforce and be productive members of our society. But more and more schools are starting to recognise this idea of being a dual purpose institution. The idea of being there not only to help a young person develop their academic knowledge, but also to help that young person to develop the wellbeing skills. And I think this is one of the key findings from the field of positive psychology, but also from studies in resilience and from the field of social emotional learning, that we can teach well-being, that well-being is something that essentially is about mindsets and skill sets, and these are things that we can teach and cultivate at school. So in the same way that we teach numeracy, in the same way that we teach literacy, we can also teach well-being. And many schools now are recognising the idea of being this sort of dual purpose institution, of being both an academic institution and teaching an academic curriculum and building the academic knowledge up in our young people, but also being a wellbeing institution and deliberately creating an environment where we explicitly teach wellbeing, but we also implicitly build the wellbeing of both the young people and the adults who are connected to that school. So for me, the purpose of a school is very much around that, having both, being an academic institution and a wellbeing institution. And, I was very interested to hear the Minister say earlier today that even as little as 8 years ago, this type of conference wouldn't have been around. So it's sort of a new discussion that's happening in schools, and it's fantastic to see ASIL hosting this kind of conference. It's fantastic that we're hosting this kind of conference up in the Northern Territory. But what I want to say to you is that you're not alone. So you're here because you're interested in how it is that we build wellbeing into the fabric of the school, wellbeing for students and wellbeing for staff. But this is actually now an international discussion, and it's becoming quite a prevalent discussion in multinational, international, global educational organisations who are all saying the same thing, which is that the measure of successful education is not just on this academic side, but the measure of a successful education system is that it's also cultivating wellbeing, and it's developing life skills, and it's connecting young people with a sense of meaning and purpose. And we see that through associations like the United Nations. In their Rights of the Child document, they talk about education, that it should be something that seeks to develop each child's personality and character as much as it develops their numeracy and their literacy. Again, in the United Nations, but this time in the UNESCO branch, so looking at their education, scientific, cultural organisation, their documents also say that children across the world should universally learn about and learn in ways that develop wellbeing, social values and community values. Then we come closer to home to our OECD, who produced a really interesting report last year, and you can download it off their website, looking at what is the purpose of education. And they have this lovely quote in their report where they say, perhaps the ultimate goal of education policymakers, teachers and parents is to help children achieve the highest levels of wellbeing possible. So this is a very reputable, very large organisation that deals with many countries who's saying the ultimate goal The ultimate goal of education is actually to build well-being. And the reason behind that is because we're starting to get a lot of evidence to show that when we build well-being, we also support the first purpose of the school. We also support the school in its academic goals. But I just want to tell you a little bit more about this OECD report. And they conducted an analysis of 37 OECD countries, looking at their national curriculum frameworks and analysing the degree to which those national curriculum frameworks are in fact prioritising well-being, are in fact accepting this dual purpose as an institution to be both an academic institution and a well-being institution. Now, this is at the country level. We're looking at national curriculum frameworks rather than at a state level or within specific education systems, be it the state system, the private system, the Catholic system, etc. And what they found across those 37 countries is that there were, firstly, 72% of those countries had explicitly and intentionally built well-being in to their national curriculum as a goal of education for that country. And Australia was in this analysis. So these are countries that say, we prioritise well-being. It is an explicit goal for any school, for any education system in our country. They should be educating in a way that is building not only the academic knowledge of the student, but also the well-being skills. And then they broke it down a little bit further and they were able to find 3 different sub-themes. You can see here the first sub-theme was achieving goals. So many of those countries in this OECD analysis in their national curriculum explicitly said we need to be teaching our students their academic knowledge, but we need to be teaching them in a way that is going to help them to achieve their goals, not only while they're at school, but also when they graduate from school. And so some of the common themes that came through were deliberately cultivating perseverance in young people, deliberately cultivating self-control, and deliberately cultivating passion. The second theme was working with others. So teaching in a way that develops sociability, teaching in a way that engenders respect for others and care for others. And you can see here that 70% of the schools within that OECD study at the national curriculum framework said we need to be teaching our students in a way that develops their social skills, that helps them have a sense of respect for others and helps them develop a sense of care for others. And then the third theme was managing emotions. That's such a critical part of learning. It's not something that's separate to learning. It's a critical part of the learning process itself. And now the neuroscientists are showing us that what we previously thought of as this sort of cognitive endeavour, that learning is this sort of intellectual cognitive endeavour, is only half of the picture. And in fact, anything that you learn, first and foremost, is a deeply emotional thing. We process all of the information that comes through us. First and foremost, we process it emotionally. And work coming out of San Diego University in the United States with the neuroscientists is they're actually looking at what happens in a classroom, connecting kids up to fMRI machines and tracking what happens in their brain. And what happens in their brain is that as the information is taken in, the first parts of the brain that register that information are the parts of the brain that register our emotions. So learning is a deeply emotional process, and if we want to help students to learn more effectively, then we need to help them to learn to manage their emotions more effectively, not only for learning but also for life and for when they graduate. So these were 62% of the country said at a national level we need to be building our education system so that we're teaching our young children how to manage their emotions, how to have high levels of self-esteem, optimism and confidence. And we know that we're hearing the same thing here in Australia through our national curriculum. And the national curriculum says that regardless of what you teach, regardless of what system you teach in, regardless of whether you teach in primary school or high school, please teach in a way that develops these, what they call the general competencies, general capabilities. And one of those 7 capabilities is personal and social capability. So teaching students in a way that develops their personal and social capability, helping them to develop empathy, helping them to develop leadership skills, helping them to build positive relationships and so forth. So we know that these kinds of conferences are happening more and more. There's a lot more research that's going on behind it. There are a lot more people who are developing expertise in this. And we know that it's not just happening here in Australia, that this is really part of an international discussion now around what is the purpose of a school and what is the role of education.